How did early humans survive the sun? We complain about sunburn after 20 minutes at the beach. Early humans lived under that same sun every single day. No sunscreen, no shade, no shelter, no hats, no clothing for most of their existence. And they not only survived it, they thrived in it. Before we get into it, tell me in the comments. Every living thing on Earth needs me to survive, but I can also destroy everything I touch. What am I? So what was actually going on? Let's start with the most important thing most people never think about. Early humans did not look like us. The first members of our genus, Homo, who appeared around 2.5 million years ago, were covered in thick body hair the same way chimpanzees are today. Dense, dark fur covering most of the body. Our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and gorillas, still have this. And for millions of years, so did we. That hair was not just for warmth. It was the original sun protection system. A dense layer of fur over the skin creates a physical barrier against direct ultraviolet radiation. It also traps a thin layer of air close to the body that acts as an insulating buffer, preventing the skin surface from overheating as quickly. But then something happened that changed everything. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million years ago, our ancestors made a dramatic shift. They moved out of the dense forest environments of Central Africa and into the open savanna, wide open grasslands. No canopy, no shade. Direct equatorial sun for 12 hours a day. And they did something no other primate had done before. They started running. Not sprinting, long-distance running. Hour after hour under the midday sun, chasing prey across open ground until the prey collapsed from heat exhaustion. Scientists call this persistence hunting, and it is one of the most brutal and brilliant survival strategies ever developed by any species on Earth. But here's the problem. Running generates enormous amounts of body heat. Combine that with direct equatorial sun, and you have a creature that is constantly on the verge of fatal overheating. The solution was to lose the fur. Over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection favored individuals with less body hair. Less hair meant better airflow across the skin. Better airflow meant more efficient cooling. And the mechanism for that cooling was something that makes humans genuinely unique among all large mammals on the planet: sweating. Humans have between 2 and 5 million eccrine sweat glands distributed across the entire body surface. No other large land mammal comes close to this number. A horse sweats. A dog does not sweat at all, which is why it pants. A chimpanzee has far fewer sweat glands than a human and cannot sustain the kind of prolonged physical exertion we can in direct heat. When sweat evaporates from the skin surface, it carries heat away from the body with extraordinary efficiency. In dry savanna conditions, a human can run for hours in midday heat that would kill most other large animals within minutes. This was not a weakness. This was a superpower. Our ancestors hunted by simply outlasting everything else alive. But losing the fur created a brand new problem. Bare skin under equatorial sun absorbs enormous amounts of ultraviolet radiation. UV radiation damages DNA. It breaks down folate, a B vitamin that is absolutely critical for fetal neural development and reproductive success. And it can cause skin cancer. So natural selection responded with melanin. Melanin is the pigment produced by specialized cells called melanocytes in the skin. It absorbs ultraviolet radiation before it can penetrate deep enough to damage DNA. The more melanin your skin produces, the darker it appears, and the more protection it provides against UV radiation. Early humans living near the equator under intense year-round UV radiation developed very high concentrations of melanin. Dark skin in equatorial populations is not an arbitrary genetic trait. It is one of the most precisely calibrated adaptations in human evolutionary history. The level of melanin in the skin of populations near the equator is almost exactly the minimum amount required to protect folate levels under the UV intensity of that specific latitude. This is why skin color varies with latitude across the globe. The further from the equator, the less UV radiation reaches the surface, and the less melanin the skin needs to produce. In fact, at high latitudes, too much melanin becomes a problem because the skin cannot synthesize enough vitamin D from the reduced sunlight available. Natural selection at higher latitudes, therefore, favored lighter skin that could absorb more of the limited UV available for vitamin D production. Skin color across human populations is essentially a map of UV radiation intensity across the surface of the planet. But melanin and sweat only explain part of the story. Early humans were also behaviorally brilliant. Archaeological evidence shows that our ancestors were not simply wandering randomly under open sun. They were using the environment strategically. They rested in shade during the hottest hours of the day and were most active in the early morning and late afternoon, when UV intensity and ambient temperature were lower. They positioned their camps near water sources that provided both hydration and localized cooling through evaporation. They used natural landforms, rock overhangs, and dense vegetation as shelter from direct sun during peak hours. And then there was diet. Antioxidants found in fruits, vegetables, and certain plant foods protect the skin and internal cells from oxidative damage caused by UV radiation. Early humans living in environments rich in plant diversity had constant access to these compounds. The same berries, tubers, and leafy plants that provided calories were simultaneously providing molecular-level sun protection from the inside. Water intake was also critical. Sweating is an extraordinarily efficient cooling system, but it only works if the body is continuously replenishing the fluid being lost. Early humans developed a profound behavioral drive to seek water regularly. The entire geographic spread of early human populations closely follows ancient water sources. Rivers, lakes, and coastlines were not just convenient, they were survival infrastructure. And then, there is one more adaptation that almost nobody talks about: the human nose. Compared to our closest primate relatives, the human nose projects significantly forward from the face. This shape warms and humidifies incoming air before it reaches the lungs. But it also plays a role in temperature regulation. The network of blood vessels in the nasal passages acts as a heat exchanger, helping to cool the blood flowing toward the brain before it arrives. The brain is the most heat-sensitive organ in the human body. A core temperature increase of just a few degrees can cause irreversible neurological damage. Keeping the brain cool under sustained physical exertion and direct heat was an existential challenge for early humans. The combination of the nasal heat exchanger and the overall efficiency of the sweating system meant that humans could run for hours in conditions that would cause other mammals to suffer fatal brain damage. So how did early humans survive the sun? They lost their fur to sweat more efficiently. They developed the densest melanin concentrations on Earth to protect against UV radiation. They hunted at the optimal times of day and rested strategically during peak heat. They ate diets rich in antioxidants that protected them at the cellular level. They built their entire civilization around water sources, and they evolved a brain cooling system so effective that they became the only large mammal capable of sustained endurance running under direct equatorial sun. The sun did not just threaten early humans, it shaped everything about what we are. Every dark patch of skin, every sweat gland, every breath through that distinctly human nose. All of it is the sun's fingerprint on our biology. We did not survive the sun by hiding from it. We were built by it.